Welcome to Stu and the Nunn, an online radio show and podcast focused on national security, policy, politics, and selfless service. We're here to give you an honest opinion, a different perspective, and hopefully a few laughs. We do this by not only interviewing guests, but also sharing our own perspectives and asking you, the listener, to interact with us on the show chat room, via our Facebook page, and on Twitter. We would like to thank those who make this show possible and allow us to bring it to you. Our show sponsors, Warrior Media Solutions, BlueHammer.com, and Enlisted 9 Fight Company, the most important sponsor we have, and want to thank them for sponsoring this show and every show. Welcome everyone to another episode of Stu and the Nunn on this March 21st, 2019, episode 159. Thank you all for joining us and welcome us into your homes, in your ears, and on your screens and everything else. We have a great and special show for you tonight. Sorry we are running late. It's all my fault. But anyways, before we move forward, I want to welcome on my brother from another motherland, Mr. Toby Nunn. Welcome, Toby. How you doing?
Well, I survived the weekend. Few people know this, but my familia, they're from this tiny island in between England and Ireland called the Isle of Man. So we part of our family claims Ireland, part of them claims England. So I was, in the words of Matt Burden, compelled to celebrate our lineage, our heritage this past weekend. But I did it drinking Guinness, which my nutritionist approved of, and I was good to go.
What kind of nutritionist you got? I want to meet that one.
She's actually a doctor, like a real doctor, and she is the head of nutrition for the University of Texas Athletics. So, like, what's up?
Okay,
it's
there's some carbs in that.
Like a real, not as many as you think. Actually, Guinness is one of the better beers out there for you. It's relatively low in caloric intake.
That's why those Irish are so thin. Here, I thought it was just the potato diet. But
no, everything's good. Getting ready to go out on a VO hunt early in the morning, and so it's hard to believe that we're already continuing to do that stuff. The season, you think it's over, and it just keeps going
it just
and
never
going
ends.
and going. But life is good, man. We're excited about tonight. But let's.
We get going. I missed last week. Sorry about that. You did a great job by yourself. I know that is not easy. Haven't done that before. I know it sucks when you're talking to yourself. You're like, is this thing on? You don't even know if people are listening. I was watching it. I was in New Orleans last week, where they started St. Patrick's Day on Thursday night. That place, I don't know how else to put it, man. I'm going to say, we're not governed by any regulation. My mom's listening, but look, that place is a shit show. Oh my goodness, man. It makes Vegas look like a church camp. It's just evil. It's a true Sin City. Dude, New Orleans is just bad.
Wow. Well, maybe that's because voodoo's involved in it. I don't know.
I don't know, but it's I don't know how people bring kids there. There were kids on Bourbon Street. I was just like, what kind of a parent are you doing? But anyways, I was there, got a little bit of that beforehand, but glad you pulled the show through and appreciate that. I was actually eating dinner on Bourbon Street at the Bourbon House when watching you on air. So I was thinking of you as I was sucking mud bugs.
I could totally feel your support while you were being big sleazy and big easy.
There you go.
But all right, man. Hey, before we get started, I wanted to give you the opportunity to hammer something home.
Yeah.
You've been hammering it home to me. I'm still not going to listen because I have a genetical predisposition to writing something.
I know.
But I think you do have a good word to share here. So PSA time.
Yeah, it's and I hope I get through okay. It's look, motorcycles are dangerous, and not because people are bad or dangerous on them. Actually, motorcycle riders that I found are usually, except for the idiot the other day that just died doing a pop wheelie, but that was just, you get what's coming to you. But he got hit by a car while he was doing it, acting like a fool. But most motorcycle guys I know are pretty safe. It's not them, it's the car, and you know this, Toby, being a rider yourself. But I just lost I've had a number of friends have accidents, and I just lost a second soldier that one I've served with, and one was a very close friend of mine I served with years ago. got killed in a single bike accident down in Atlanta. And then last Friday, one of my former soldiers, my head company medic, and was down in Florida. He lives in Florida. It was at Daytona Bike Week, but was just riding home and had a car pull out in front of him. And he was on a highway going full speed, and it just pulled right out, and he hit it T-boned right on the side. And I mean, 46 years young, you know, Purple Heart recipient, and a great medic, Afghanistan tour, and you know, survived all that, and then has this guy pull out in front of him, and they kept him on life support until all the family got there, and on Monday they had to take him off. It was just, there was nothing left, and you know, it's been heartbreaking to my unit, to my community, even though all my guys mostly have gotten out and retired and doing whatever. But we are, as you know, and as our guest knows too, man, it's a bond tighter than blood. And you know, you whether you talk every day or see each other every day, it doesn't take but something to bring everyone back together. And you know, you're always there for each other. And it just be careful, man. And I ask that of you, and I ask that of anyone that rides. I've had other friends have bad accidents, also not at their own fault. And it just pains me, and I always have a streak of worry in me when that happens. But it just I mean, I know things can happen in cars. They can happen. You could be on one of the 737 Maxes. Anything can happen. But it just seems like too many friends. I had 2 people I know are getting hurt on bikes, and God forbid, killed on bikes. So, to my former medic, Sergeant Eric Dunn, raising you a glass of brown water up to you tonight, and peace, brother, and we'll see you on the other side. And sorry you had to leave this earth so early, my friend. So, with that, let's continue our show. This one's dedicated to Eric for sure.
All right. No, it's one of those things. Like I think our community, you know, the Marine Corps actually went and did a very extensive study into it, but our community really, you know, is big in motorcycles, and you know, some of it has to do with, you know, like the freedom of it. Some of it has to do with the excitement of it. Some of it has to do with like the connection, like feeling the connection to the earth. I know that only makes sense to people that ride, but
it's exhilarating.
You know,
I've been on bikes before.
It's the
awesome.
same as it's the same as surfing,
right?
You know, like you're doing something on the earth that isn't supposed to happen. You're kind of utilizing the powers that be. You know, like obviously my connection to motorcycles is through my father,
right? And
you know, being raised by a guy that, you know, took it to the limit. You know, it's tough for me to walk away from it, but in my elder years, I find myself doing it on only very nice weather days, and only on low traffic days, and typically only in confined areas where damage and traffic is limited.
Not on icy days.
Tracks.
Yeah, not on icy, snowy days.
Yeah, there was just one time only, and that was just to prove a point to my brother in Canada. But enough about that, because we're talking about brothers, and we got an amazing brother from another motherland with us tonight, making it a trifecta for and all guys that you know, because New York's a different country. At least Buffalo is. That's where That's right. We got Remy on tonight, and I'm like super excited about this because I love all great American stories, and I think this is one of the coolest American stories out there. And America's getting credit for this young man that I don't know if she deserves, but you know, like possession's 9/10 of the law, right? So without further ado, Remy, welcome to the show. Remy, you are something else, my dude. You are something else. So like, I'm going to let you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, kind of where you came from, but don't get too deep in it, because I got a million questions for you that we can walk through some of that stuff. But born and partially raised.
Yeah. In Nigeria. Yep. Nigeria. So I spent the early part of my life in Nigeria. My dad, he was a well-known Nigerian engineer. As well as being an engineer, he was a philanthropist and a businessman. He engineered one of the first man-made islands in the world that exists to this day, and it's called Banana Island. So when I was born into wealth. Had a silver spoon in my mouth, so to speak. We didn't have a nanny. We had nannies. We didn't have a car. We had cars. We traveled the world. We had it all. But that all changed in 1980.
Did we lose him for a second?
No, he's there.
Okay.
Like this is where I could make a horrible bad joke, Remy. This is where I could be like, "Are you the guy that keeps sending me emails?"
Hey, trust me, I've heard all the Nigerian jokes.
Do you got 4 million? You need me to you need my bank account to send over?
You need me to hold onto my account.
But the funny thing is, my dad, he was a chief. So in English culture, like European culture, you refer to royalty as, you know, king, queen, Dutch, prince, princess. Right. In Nigerian culture and a lot of West African culture, we refer to royalty as chief. So my father, he was a Nigerian chief, so his full name was Chief Adebayo Adeleke, and our last name Adeleke, Ade means crown and Leke means is above. And so I always get the joke going, hey, well, you that African prince that I need to wire the money to. And it's like, yeah, give me your money.
No, I'll give you money. In fact, I'm going to give you some here in a little bit when I buy your book that we're going to talk about. Yeah. But what a dramatic change! What a drastic change! You lost your father in some pretty horrific circumstance. Yeah. Your mom, you got a couple of siblings, and you found yourselves here in the land of milk and honey, not drinking milk and honey.
No, not at all. So my mom, she was born in America, and she met my dad in America, and she moved to Africa with him. So when he died. And the Nigerian government, because the Nigerian government stripped our family of absolutely everything. So we went from rich to poor. And my mom, you know, her mindset, she was like, I'm not going to raise my kids here in Africa. So she brought us back to the States, and that's where I grew up in the Bronx. And, you know, my mom, she struggled. People ask me all of the time, you know, where do you get your perseverance and your resilience from? And I always say I get it from my mom because I was able to witness a woman who could have easily given up at any point in her life, but she just kept on pushing and fighting to make sure that she could provide a life for her boys. I remember there were times when my mom didn't have enough food to feed both me, my brother, and herself. So she would just give my brother and I some food, split it between us, and stand in the kitchen door and watch us eat while she pretty much didn't eat. So it was a really rough environment and upbringing.
The little did you know that skill was going to come in handy a few years later, like to watch other people eat while you go without. So you got yourself in a little bit of trouble as a Ute in the Bronx there. What was it that took you from the trajectory that you were on to decide to go to the Navy? Was it like a seeking of escape? It was seeking of security, seeking of like just any chance of a future?
Yeah, I would say it was a combination of things. One, you know, I just got, as you mentioned, I got involved in a lot of bad stuff, selling drugs, running illegal scams. I mean, I was doing it all. And by the time I was 19, I was funding a record company with drug money and other illegal money. I got involved in a deal with a drug dealer one day that went really, really bad. I sold him some products that were supposed to last for a certain amount of time, and it only lasted for a fraction of that time. And he came knocking on my door. Not my door, but he came knocking on my mom's apartment door. And he threatened me, and essentially he threatened my mom in our apartment, and essentially said, if you don't have my money by a certain time, things are not going to go too well for you. And I knew what that meant, knowing his reputation. I knew that he was going to kill me. And so, you know, I went out into the streets. I made him the money that I needed to make him within a day, and I gave him back that money. And that was a huge wake-up call. That was probably the first wake-up call for me that said, you know, Remy, you need to get out of here. You need to get out of this place. And so for 6 months, I sat home and did absolutely nothing. I didn't, you know, I stayed out of the streets. I just meandered around the house, and my mom would just get on me every day, like, you need to get a job. I'm not taking care of no man. And one day I was laying in my bed, and I heard this voice speak to me, and this voice told me, you need to get out of here. You need to join the military. And I remember just battling in my room because I hated the military. I hated people in positions of authority. I like my clothes baggy and my hats backwards. So joining the military was totally contrary to who I was and what I had been raised to believe. But after laying in my bed for a period of time, I looked around and I said to myself, you have nothing left. Like what else do you have, Remy? You've lost everything. What else are you going to do with your life? And finally, I convinced myself to get out of the bed, and I walked down the street I grew up on, Fordham Road, and that's what essentially led me to join the Navy. It was just like either end up dead or in prison, which was the path that I was on, or join the military. Interesting thing is when I went, the recruiter ran my background, and she found out that I had 2 warrants out for my arrest. So
hey, you're gonna have to clean this up.
we're gonna need a waiver here or 2.
Yeah.
Now let me real quick, Remy, before you get to were those warrants from? But now, when you talked about you were doing some stuff with drug deals, just to be clear, people need to read the book to see why. But you weren't selling drugs, you were selling tools that maybe they could use. I'll keep it at that. You can go in details you want. But was it from that or something prior to that? Because you were always worried then you were going to get busted.
Yeah. It was something prior to that. It was 2 of them. One of them was something prior to me going to jail. It wasn't necessarily the drugs or the phones, but there were 2 other things. I won't give it away. One of them is in the book, but there were 2 other incidents that happened that essentially led to the warrants, and I never showed up to court, and that's what essentially led to the warrants and led to me, getting, one step closer to jail instead of the Navy. Yeah.
So that was that. I mean, you can get the sense of it in your book, and when you had that wake up call when this guy's at the doorstep of your mom's house. So it's not like you could disappear and he'd never come find you. Now he knew where your house was, right?
Yeah.
And you obviously weren't going to put your mom at risk, so you knew you had to cut bait and get out, right? And
yeah, absolutely.
And that must be interesting for your mom, because here you were making a lot of money, looking really successful to her, which you were being successful, and then you just walked away from it and hung out the house for 6 months. She's probably like,
Yeah. It was an interesting time because my mom, like all mothers, I don't think she wanted to believe that what I was doing was wrong. I think in the back of her mind she was hoping that I was doing the right thing. But when it all fell apart and it all blew up, it was a sudden change. It was a sudden shift. No longer was I away from the house. Now I'm under the house, and a lot of questions arose at that time.
So let's talk about like the cultural shift from going from that environment to the Navy. We're both Army guys. We're infantry dudes. Like we went to the Fort Benning School for Boys there, and so what was your journey like? Where did you touch down at? Where did you how did you get in? Like, what was your first job? And what led you to NSW?
Yeah, so my first job in the Navy, I was a corpsman. I got to boot camp after boot camp. Well, actually, when I was at boot camp, there was 2 things that led me to want to be a SEAL. I back up for a bit. The first thing was there was a film by the name of The Rock that came out in '96.
Yeah.
And when that film came out, that was
Sean Connery.
Classic. That was the first time I was exposed to Navy SEALs. I had never in my life heard of Navy SEALs, and after watching that film, I think I was about 15 at the time. This dream kind of came up in my mind. Hey, one day I can be a Navy SEAL, but it was like a far-fetched idea. And so I buried that dream deep down within me. And then when I finally got to boot camp, a Navy SEAL came and he put on a presentation as to what SEALs do. He showed us videos of SEALs jumping from planes and scuba diving and shooting guns. And I was just like, dang, you get paid to do all that? I want that job.
Yeah.
And so that's what really kind of got me focused. And when I got to my first command, I put in a request to have my schedule shifted so that I could work out a good part of the day. And I didn't have a car, so I would run 3 miles to the pool. I couldn't swim, and I would just jump in the shower and try and figure it out, and then I would run 3 miles back home. And then I would just make up workouts, and I just studied the ASVAB test to get my ASVAB up because my ASVAB scores weren't high enough to get into the program. And eventually, I was accepted into BUD+, but my path to BUD+, started with a film. And then there was a presentation and really kind of pushed me in that direction. And then once I got, and it was another thing, when I got to my first command and I was working at a hospital, it wasn't what I envisioned life to be as a person in the military in general. You know, I expected to join the Navy and then throw on a rucksack and be running around, you know, a forest somewhere training and then go off somewhere to deploy. So I was expecting to be working in a hospital essentially 9 to 5, checking in babies and doing vital signs, you know. And so when I got there and when life wasn't as exciting as I thought it could be, that was another thing that kind of propelled me to really chase this idea and this dream of being a SEAL. And then another thing, best. You know, I didn't, just like when I was growing up in the Bronx and I wanted to, you know, hustle so I could make tons of money and I could have this record company and I could have this notoriety and all of these things. I wanted to be a SEAL because I wanted to be part of it. I wanted to achieve the highest level of success in the Navy that I thought I could achieve. And so those were all the reasons that kind of led me into NSW.
You know, so there's a lot of SEALs right now that when they hear this, they're going to smile because you actually referenced The Rock. Instead of referencing like Navy SEALs with Charlie Sheen.
I didn't hear a reference to Demi Moore. I'm just saying, you know.
Or yeah. No, like,
no, you're not.
it's good. Like because that was actually a cool movie, and you know, like it wasn't, you know, like some jackassery with a dude, you know, jumping off the backside of a Jeep off a bridge going on to Coronado, which like, not going to survive that.
No, exactly.
You know, like you know, so it's like good times to like see, you know, like someone watched a movie that's like, you know, Army Rangers, right? Like, you know, like what movie made you want to like, you know, become an Army Ranger, you know? If they say Con Air, you're like, maybe. At least it's
Black
not.
Black Hawk Down, right?
Well, if you watch Black Hawk Down, you want to be a Ranger, you like should probably think about it because that wasn't our best moment.
Definitely think about that fast roping. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's like, you want me to go? Oh, Blackburn fell.
Yeah.
Anyway, no, like super excited to have you here because, you know, we get a lot of Army guys on every now and then. We get, you know, we've had Matt Hyde on, who's retired Navy SEAL as well. But the cool thing about this challenge that you put in front of you you wanted to be the best of your peer group. You know, you wanted to have the adventure. You realized it wasn't all that it was cracked up to be, but what you were really saying and what you're really feeling, if I understand this correct, especially from, you know, like the little snapshot we get in the book that we're going to talk about here in a second, is that you wanted more for yourself, and you knew that you had more within yourself, and like. This is like this great moment in time that all good, self-respecting people, I want to use the term men, but I'm going to say people, you know, they're like, man, I could just do more. This is what's being asked of me, and this is what I'm capable of. It's not the same. I want to close that gap because
exactly,
you know, and it's that gap, right? That bothers me. Like, you know, like physically, I'm not what I was, but you know, there's this gap in business. There's this gap in service. There's this gap in, you know, community that I'm like, man, I got to close that gap because I'm not operating at my potential. I'm not operating, and that just sounds so lame. It's like I feel like I'm singing a Matt Best song right now. Like I operate. I agree. But you're not operating at your optimum level, and it's like that you offer more, and it's like I love hearing it when people identify that moment. There's a really good friend of mine. His name's Ben, NSW guy. You know, he joined the Navy as a firefighter, And then he went from firefighting into the teams. And then from the teams, even there, he was like, man, I can do more. And you might even know who I'm talking about. But like, I love that moment in time where like we're honest with ourselves.
Yep.
And we bear down.
No, absolutely.
You know, like, and that, I think, if we did that as a society, if we did that as a culture, if we did that as a community where we're like, man, we are not operating in the golden band of excellence. You know, like, if we're not in that golden band of excellence, how do we get there? And let's get after it. You know, not to quote Jocko, but like, let's get after it. You know, let's find that. And I love that. That's one of the things that really spoke to me. So let's hear a little bit about that time, like going from a corpsman into NSW, and like, because you kind of ramped it up.
Yeah. And I love what you said, because I was actually just having this conversation yesterday with a group of people about, you know, just meeting the standard, right? You have people who just like meet the standard, they check that box, and that's enough. And when you just meet the standard, there's nothing inspirational about that. But when you do what you're called to do with excellence, that inspires other people, and it can inspire you to move forward. So I was just having that conversation with somebody yesterday. But yeah, I checked into NSW, and it was challenging for me because I had just learned how to swim. I'll kind of back up a little bit. While I was training to swim, I had just trained myself to swim without fins. I didn't know that when I got the buds, I was going to have to swim with fins. And I remember during the first base swim, it's called wetsuit appreciation. They made us swim in the cold bay without wetsuits, and this is in January in San Diego, and it gets really, really cold in January in San Diego, believe it or not. And I'm kicking as hard as I could kick, and I'm pulling as hard as I could pull, and I'm not going anywhere because I have these fins on, and I have no clue what I'm doing. And I remember the instructors, they all pointed to me, and I looked up, and they said, "How the heck do you show up to Navy SEAL training? You can't even swim." And all I could say was, "Hoo-yah." They didn't like my response. But I crushed everything in buds. I crushed except for swims. I crushed the runs. I could take the beat down sessions. I could take the old course, the rough runs. All the other kind of water evolutions. But the hardest thing for me were the time ocean swims. And I remember there were times when the time limit was 85 minutes, and I would swim 120 minutes. And at the end of every swim, or not even at the end, halfway towards the end of the swim, I was either hypothermic or borderline hypothermic because the instructors wouldn't pull me out unless I quit. So it was a great challenge for me, but it just pushed me over and over again to not quit, to not give up. Eventually, after I made it through Hell Week, which in Hell Week is one of the worst weeks in SEAL training, they keep you up for 6 days straight, starts on Sunday, ends on Friday. You get 2 hours of sleep on Wednesday, 2 hours of sleep on Thursday, and it's just straight torture. After I made it through Hell Week, the instructors pulled me aside and they said, "Hey, dude, we see that you're a hard dude and that you haven't quit despite all your challenges. We're going to teach you how to swim now." So they pulled me out of class and they wrote me back 2 classes to teach me how to swim. And then once I learned how to swim with fins, that's when I classed back up with the next class and made it through Hell Week.
That's an inspirational message, right? I think most people think that the only way you have a chance to get into something like Navy SEALs is to know how to swim, like be an expert swimmer, be a Michael Phelps like your whole life, and then, come right over. So what a great story of, coming out of the Bronx, really know how to swim. And I also want to ask too, I mean, were you in that really great a physical shape just naturally, just great genes, or were you a workout buff? I mean, it wasn't like you were doing Tough Mudders in Bronx or whatever.
No, not at all.
Yeah, because they have a ton of those there.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, they have a ton of those. That was a good one.
Or is it just running between the bullets, running between the bullets and jumping
it's
over?
Like park. They have like a parkour course. Like it's called like evasion from law enforcement.
Yeah.
Running from getting jumped. But I was skinny. I was skinny pretty much my whole life. I didn't really work out. I wasn't athletic in any way. But it wasn't until I got to my command that I actually started working out. And that's when, from putting in the work, I saw the results. So some people would look at me after I got to the point I got to, and they would say, "Oh, it's only genetic. Like all you got to do is just one push-up and you're there. But no, I had to put in a whole lot of work to get to that point where I can take the beatings and endure the runs and endure the push-ups and the pull-ups and all those other things that come with SEAL training.
Man, you showed up raw. You showed up like a piece of Play-Doh or putty, and they shaped you into everything.
Yeah.
They really did.
Yeah, exactly.
I say they shaped you, but you had to maintain the intestinal fortitude and the motivation, and not to get the mind messed with and everything else. And I mean that says a lot to your character too. It's not just like, they were cool about it. And it's like, hey, we're gonna help you here, right? You had to prove yourself, and you had to stick with that.
Yeah. The mental piece is a big part of it. I tell people all the time, and they don't mental. Show up to Buds. If you pass the screening test, which is, I'm sure you guys have the same type of entry program for Army Rangers, Delta, and those other programs. But if you pass the 500-yard swim, the push-ups, the sit-ups, the pull-ups, and the run, physically, you have just told the Navy that you are qualified physically to make it through SEAL training. So every guy that shows up to SEAL training, they have what it takes physically. No ifs, ands, or buts. If they didn't, they wouldn't be there. The question now becomes, can you make it through mentally?
Right.
Because they break you down mentally. The goal is to strengthen this noggin as much as it can be strengthened. So regardless of what situation you're in, whether you're in Afghanistan like the guys in the lone survivor situation, whether you're having to chase a terrorist however many miles in the middle of the desert where it's like 120 degrees outside and you don't have any QRF in sight, and you're out of pretty much everything, and you're not going to quit. I mean, they're trying to force your mind to become this impenetrable object, and so
they make it too easy to go ring that bell, right? They put that thing in front of you all the time.
Oh yeah.
Dude,
yeah.
Really. So I've had the pleasure, I guess, or the honor of getting to witness some training at. A really cool briefing on the quarterdeck there, and then got to go out to the grinder. And it was interesting because you're talking about time swim. We were out there to do an event with Team 3, and it was a couple of years ago. Yeah. And I'm eating breakfast. I'm down at Hotel Del Mar, I think is the nice hotel down at the beach, right? And we're sitting there looking at the beach, and I see the water froth up, and I'm like, oh man, bait ball, and I'm a fisherman, so I got all excited. I'm like, man, look at that bait ball, man, that's awesome. And then I see this little skiff, Zodiac, come behind it, and I realize oh, that's the safety boat, and these guys are swimming, right? So I finish my coffee, and so we go to the quarterdeck, we get our briefing, we go out to the grinder. And dude, it's just like the movies, and it's right there. There's no in your mind, you're there's this mystique, it's off in some secret place. No, it's it's in Coronado, up the largest avenue, and you get out, and it's pitch black, painted pitch black. There are the little footprints, and there's the bell, and there were the helmets lined up, right? Yeah. And they got the helmets down. Now guys start coming out of the water, and I realized, I looked at my watch, and I was like, man, I was eating breakfast a minute ago. Yeah. And these dudes are coming out of the water.
A long time ago.
I was and we went for a little swim ourselves, and I was like, man, this is and it was oh man, June or July, and I was uncomfortably cold in the water then, so I can't imagine, it's another time of year. But no, it's right there. Where you're going through that, and then you go through they had guys also going through phase 2 at the time, where they're doing the Traegers and all that stuff. So it was really neat to witness a classroom experience. But man, one note about, he was talking about the obstacle course. So we have some pretty cool obstacle courses. Theirs is interesting because it's built for speed. It is all about getting through that thing as fast as you can. And they don't really mess with you. They're because it's based on how fast you can get through it. They have most of the same, they have the tough one. They have different names for, we have the belly buster. They call it the dirty name. Yeah, so it's like there's a lot of similarities, but theirs is 100% built for speed.
Yeah,
And
the Army one's not. Yeah,
you're hearing these guys like going through in like 8-9 minutes or something. You're like, what? You're like, can you imagine someone doing the Derby or doing an air assault course, like obstacle course, and like, no, like that time was spent by an instructor scuffing somebody up.
And the thing about why we burned through it so fast is because first and foremost, your first run, you have to pass, right? Because if you don't pass, you get hammered. I mean, you get hammered really, really bad. And then if you don't pass a certain amount of times, you get kicked out of training. But then after you set your baseline score, every time you run it after that, you have to pass your previous score.
Oh, you got to do better. You can never be worse, or you guys do better.
Yeah, so you have to do better. And if you pass, but you don't do better, you still get the credit for passing, but you get hammered. You get put in the goon squad. And after running the O course, you do not want to be in the goon squad. So that's why guys really push to pass, to get a faster score, because you're kind of trying to avoid extra beatdown.
Hey, I don't want to dwell on it, but in what am I looking? Facebook chat, there's a question. From Tom Mead. Tom Mead's a Army Special Forces guy, very accomplished, and he's asking, how long were you at your first command before you went to Buds? Like, how long were you in, I guess, fleet? How long were you in the fleet before you went to NSW?
Well, the first time was a year. So I was at my Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton for 1 year. I checked in January 2003, and then I checked in January 2004. And then, as I share in the book, I got all the way to second phase, dive phase of Buds, and I got kicked out of Buds. And halfway, I failed. The swim times dropped from 85 minutes to 80 minutes. I didn't make the times. I was out partying. I explained the whole story in my book. And then I failed the dive evolution 4 times. And I went to an ARB board, and I got kicked out. And then I went back to the fleet. This time I was in 1st Marine Division, the infantry, as a corpsman. I was there for about a year and a half, and then I went back to Buds and made it through. So
good for you, bro.
Yeah, I had to start all over from day one. So I've done 2 hell weeks and all everything twice, man. So, yeah, I mean,
2 is better than 1.
Yeah, that's true.
It's so much fun. You had to do it again.
Well, my body would have preferred that I made it through one time.
one time only.
Do you feel like you were? Do you think you were better mentally prepared knowing kind of what you were going to face? Do you think you went in mentally stronger? Not that you weren't the first time, the second time, because you kind of know, hey, I just got to make through. It's going to mess with me. It's a gut check kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I was definitely mentally. I was probably a little bit more, but I was really mentally strong the first time. I just wasn't as focused as it related to my deficiencies.
Right.
But the first time, because the first time after I made it through Hell Week and graduated the second phase, I got prideful. I mean, I got super prideful. I was out in the clubs chasing girls, telling girls at the bar when they would ask me, "Hey, so what do you do?" I'm a Navy SEAL. Literally, I'm doing this and I'm in Buds, right? And
glad you didn't get busted by someone.
I'm glad. I know. But yeah, I was crazy, and on the weekends the instructors would have remediation training. So if you had a deficiency in anything, they would show up and work on your deficiency. But I was too hungover from partying and hanging out that I would never show up. So the first time I just wasn't. I was mentally strong because I could take the beatings on it, but I wasn't as focused as I needed to be. The second time around, it was my last shot. I knew that this was going to be my last shot making it through. So not only was I mentally strong, but I was actually more mentally focused on what I needed to do. And I breezed through Buds the second time.
Good. Awesome. Your story is inspirational. In fact, are you familiar with, I'm sure you are, but I don't want to just, are you familiar with the story of Nathan Brown?
Yeah. He's a former SEAL, right?
He's a former SEAL. Went all the way up to Green. Went all the way up to 6, and came. It's if you've never read the book, Eric Blem, who we've had on the show before.
Oh, you mean
Matt Brown?
No, Nate. Adam Brown. I'm sorry, I said Nate.
Adam.
What am I thinking?
Yeah. I know about Adam Brown. Yeah.
Fearless, the book Fearless.
Fearless. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's. granted he went way rock bottom. I mean, he was. I mean, that guy was near. But it's such an inspirational story of faith and a testament of fortitude and spirit and determination. And for people that have read that, I think your book is I think they can put it in the same ballpark. I mean, you went through a lot of challenges too. That at any point in a moment, you could have been veered off the wrong path, right, and never been able to return.
Absolutely.
And I think
absolutely. that's no, and I'm glad you brought that up, because when I wrote the book, I wrote the book myself. I didn't have a ghostwriter. I didn't have an assistant writer. I wrote it 100% myself. I got into writing at a young age, and I had an option when I was writing. I could have wrote it as where I was focusing just on the missions and the operations, because I did do a lot of that stuff. I did deploy downrange and have some great journey story. I wanted to tell a story that people would be able to read and say, dang, if this dude can go through all of these challenges and still achieve his dreams, why can't I? Regardless of what my deficiency is, regardless of where I come from, my background, what my setbacks, why can't I make it? And so that's why I tried to be as authentic as I could with my failures. As a matter of fact, when you read the book, and you'll notice that it's essentially a book of a failure.
Right. Well, I don't have to tell you this, but I talk to a lot of people about leadership and things like that, and I tell people the most overlooked trait is humility and humbleness, right? And any of us can look at a superior, and we see them when they are hypocritic, and they say one thing and do something else, or they talk about ethics, integrity, and you see them don't demonstrate it. You're like, yeah, right, whatever. But if you can expose your soul, if you can lay it all out there and say, here's my weakest spot, take a shot at it, and come back and still demonstrate what you've done in your career and your life. I mean, that's something that people admire. And it looks like this guy's, he didn't cross his arms. He opened up and said, take your best shot, right? I am flawed. And there's only one perfect person ever walked this earth. I am as flawed as they come. But I, like you said, what an inspiration. Just people think they've hit the rock bottom, right? We hear about the 22 a day all the time, and we see, and not even just vets, but we see guys or girls that have a relationship issue and they think that's the end of the world. It's just a relationship, or they lose a job or whatever. Man, you show in your book how it was, and it was what could you come back from? Hey, you went to Bud, you didn't know how to swim, you weren't in great shape, you still overcame. It shows nothing's impossible, and that's what I really love about it.
Thank you, brothers. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. I can't push people enough to definitely get a copy or read it. I mean, and you've done so much with you're acting, you're in movies, you're modeling.
Well, let's talk about that. Yeah. Let's get into it.
You're so much more than just a SEAL, man.
To be naked in front of a camera.
Talk about exposing yourself. I mean, I didn't even think about that, but that was a heck of a
with my soul for real. My jockeys. No, but on the transition from the military stumbles everybody in some capacity. I have yet to meet someone that was a career anything within the military that hasn't stumbled within the transition process. Now there's guys that stumble more gracefully than others, and gals that stumble more gracefully than others. But for the most part, everybody stumbles in some capacity. And that's the cool thing about the vulnerability of your story. A lot of, hey, look at me, guys, and NSW's full of them, the military's full of them. We tend to hear more about the NSW guys just because, they apparently are sexier than everybody else.
Well, they usually have better hair. I don't know. And,
they usually have better hair. Like, he's got no product. He's got no product. But no, you've done pretty well. Like, you wrote your own book. One of the most, famous. We'll say. We'll take Fearless by Eric Blem out because Eric Blem's a wonderfully accomplished guy. I think he's a brilliant dude. He's an inspiration to a lot of people. He pushes himself intellectually, he pushes himself physically, so I'm going to keep him out of the conversation. But we'll talk about Chris Kyle's book. He didn't author it. we'll talk about Marcus Luttrell's book. He didn't author it. You actually like ran the paces here. You didn't sit down with somebody and tell your story and, they put it together. Like Dakota Meyer, like great book, great story. And I'm not disrespecting anybody's story. But like you actually went through the cathartic paces of having to like put it down. And when you put it down yourself, like there's additional vulnerability there, because not only are you being honest with a ghostwriter in these other cases, you actually have to be honest with yourself. And you have to be like, man, am I really going to let them know that, these people came to the door of my house and threatened my mom? Like, if ever, like until we're married, and have kids, like the greatest treasure in our lives are our parents. And we must, like God commands us to like protect them, to love and honor them. And here, like this dude came to your house, like, and he busted it down like for your mom. Like no one wants to look bad in front of mom. Yeah. Like, even like, Troy's mom's probably in the chat room right now, like checking up on him, using that bad language.
Yeah, I'll be hearing about that.
That's right. But that vulnerability, putting it through the paces and then challenging yourself and pushing yourself. Now, like you kind of busted into Hollywood a little bit. It was a dynamic entry. Like it wasn't mechanical. Like it was definitely.
It wasn't planned. It wasn't part of my plan.
Like it was a dynamic entry. But you've been in a movie, and I like. Let's just put this in perspective. You've been in a movie with Anthony Hopkins. Yeah. No big deal, right?
Yeah.
Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah.
Josh Duhamel. Like.
I just finished working on a movie with Ryan Reynolds.
He's Canadian. He's Canadian.
Well, see, that's a shout out to you, dude. If you're in Deadpool 3, I'm gonna lose my mind. If you're in Deadpool 3, that's all I'm gonna
say. He's in the next. He's in the next Van Wilder. No, but like
Van Wilder's a professor. There we go.
Now you've come in like a lion, my dude. You got this wonderful opportunity, and I had the blessing to be able to work on a set or two. I got the opportunity to go to Dolphin Tale. Totally weird story how that all went down. We'll talk about it some other time. But like you see these people that you watch on the screen, and you look at it in a certain thing, and it's interesting because you realize they're just a person. You realize they're human and they're fallible. And then you realize like you actually offer a lot more than they do. And, they have like this superficial ability, but they also have this wonderful talent.
Yeah.
And you think like they have this noble purpose behind them. Like I remember Morgan Freeman was, talking to some people, and I was lucky enough to stand there and listen and kind of eavesdrop and be part of it while I was on set. And someone was asking him, like, you got the opportunity to be the voice of God. You got the opportunity to be this like influential doctor in this movie. Like, what inspired you about this script to do it? And he was like, they said 8.2. and everyone like looked at him like, is that like a rating or like what's 8.2? Like, he was like,
$1 million.
It's $8.2 million. And I was like, okay. Like, he's like, he didn't even read the script. There's some magic to this. He's like, my agent comes to me and he's like, I like blue water. I got this really cool sailboat. I like to be down in the blue water. I like to chill out. I got, kids, grandkids, great grandkids. He's like, I gotta feed people. And the guy comes and says 8.2. I'm like, I'm your Huckleberry. That's not exactly what he said. He didn't say Huckleberry, but he was just like. And so when you get there and you see that, you see this human side and stuff, like, but most people don't get to open up in a huge franchise, huge blockbuster franchise. I spent my allowance on Transformers as a kid. I like, you know, like I went to my friend's house to have sleepover so I could watch Transformer cartoons because like that was a no-go in the Nunn household when I was a kid. You know, like, and so like here you are, you know, like getting to be part of this big franchise. Like that's a huge opening in terms of acting. And now like I see like you got a new Netflix series coming out or something like that, or what do you do? You're like producing on like.
I was consulting on the recent movie I was consulting on, did some acting on was Michael Bay's last film called Six Underground. It doesn't come out until the summer, but it's starring Ryan Reynolds. Yeah.
There's some explosions. There's gonna be some explosions in that one.
Mike, you know, like maybe you've heard of him. He's the dude with the big booms in Hollywood. Like,
yeah.
No big deal.
So yeah, I just finished wrapping up on that film in December, and then I've done some work on some TV shows, and I just signed with a production company / management company called Zero Gravity, and I just wrote a film. Writing my book kind of gave me the confidence to branch off into screenplay writing, and so I wrote my first film that's loosely based off of a chapter in my book called The Chameleon. The chapter is called The Chameleon, and that's the name of the film. And I was like, let me see where this goes. And after I wrote it, I shopped it around to some people in the industry. They all loved it. And then I took it to a production company, Zero Gravity. They produce Ozark and The Accountant and Proud Mary and a bunch of other stuff, and they signed me. And so now we're going through a small rewrite process before we take it to market to get a studio to get behind it to distribute it. So, kind of, after working on films and doing the consulting thing, I have this strategic mind, and as you guys have read from my book, I like to challenge myself. It's just like I'm not content. Just okay. What's next? And after being on these sets and seeing where the real control is and the real influence and power, I realized that it's not in being just a tech advisor and showing somebody how to hold a gun. It's not just being an actor and doing a scene here and there. It's about creating content. And in creating content, and you have control over that content, and you put more money in your pocket. So after, before I finished writing my book, studios began to come to me to request the rights to my book to turn into a film. So that's when I was like, okay, if studios are already coming to me for a book that's not even finished being written yet, how many studios will come to me if I have a screenplay that I'm writing based off of my experience? So, and I'm on my second film I'm writing now too. You guys would appreciate, and it's an Army film, but it's a historical Army film about the first and only all African American Special Forces unit to serve in the military. That's all I can say. I can't go.
Oh, all right, all right.
But I'm writing.
You got my attention.
Yeah.
Now, like, now, do I understand correctly that you might be making an on-screen appearance, with my brother that's kind of short? You maybe familiar with him. He's got really jacked ears. Are you going to be in that?
Yeah. Chad. Yeah, he put me in his movie.
Boy. That's what I'm talking about.
You had me at short. I knew who you was talking about, Toby. I was like,
apparently he's overseas or something.
Yeah.
There's no telling where he is.
Chad's movies in production, and he hit me up, asked me to be a part of it. So it's an honor to start with him. It's a solid dude. So yeah, man.
Well, I'll see you there because I'll somehow have to buy my way on there or something. But rumor has it I'm excited about that. But hey, let's talk about Transformed real fast because we're knocking on getting close to an hour here. So you wrote this yourself.
Yes, sir.
You actually have a fairly firm grasp of the English language. Let's talk about that.
Toby's written a book. Toby's written a book too. There's a reason why he's saying that.
Oh, okay.
I don't have a firm grasp on the English language. It might suck, but no, you are not, and that's what's so this is what it's kind of cool about you. You are stereotypically defiant. You're like, oh, I don't know how to swim. You're like, well, there's a stereotype.
Yeah.
I'm going to defeat that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna defeat that. Like Bronx, not known for the Queen's English, not known for like
Yeah.
being totally grammatically sound. You've put together a pretty solid piece, man. Like it's great, and it's like it doesn't matter who you are, like, and this is the cool thing about your story. It doesn't matter if you're a little girl.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're a little boy. It doesn't matter if you're an immigrant. It doesn't matter, if you come from the greatest place of privilege.
Yeah.
This story, everybody can take something out of it.
Yeah.
Like,
and that was the way I tried to write it.
Yeah, and it's so cool because I'm like, like Fearless is like a wonderful story of faith, and Blam, I think, did a wonderful job of that. But your story is just like, it doesn't matter who you are. Like, there's some stories, like I think Mark Bowden's like an amazing writer. Stephen Ambrose, a wonderful writer. But for you to get something out of that, you have to have some skin in that game. You have to have some kind of tangible connection to that relationship, be it, like Stephen Ambrose's book, Comrades, or, Band of Brothers, Bowden's like Letters from the Ayatollah, or, Black Hawk Down, or, Road Work, or any of those books. Like, you have to have some kind of tangible connection. You have to have some kind of relationship with that content. Yours is just life.
Yeah.
Like, highs of highs, lows of lows. You can look at it racially, you can look at it ethically, you can look at it theologically, you can look at it spiritually, because some of those are, theology and spirituality sometimes aren't the same. Like, you can look at it from all these different angles, and it doesn't matter who you are. Like, it's, hey, you got to earn it. You just got to work. Like,
amen.
Here's the cards that the dealer gave you. Like, it's okay to push them back. Like, let's demand something else. Let's close that gap. Let's be better. Let's do better. And I'm like pumped about it because like there's rumblings in the back rooms. They're like, this is gonna be really good, and it's like, in my mind, I'm like, oh great, another Navy SEAL wrote a book, because like
there's that stereotype too. There's that stereotype.
Yeah, no, I
like
know.
100%, like 100%.
But
like,
no, honestly, real quick, Toby, he breaks that mold in the fact that most of those are written about this cool mission. It was awesome, and there's so on. Yeah, you talk about, that's not what the book's about, right?
No. And I essentially, like, when I came in this, Kathy Lee Gifford pretty much walked me to the publisher and told him, you need to sign this guy to a book deal. And me and her had, I don't want to say an argument, but somewhat of a disagreement, because she said, your story is too, and I said, I do not want to write a book because I don't want to be put in the same category as other guys who write books. And she said, well, Remy, you don't have to focus on just the missions. You can focus on your life. Your life is it. And that's when I was like, okay, if I do this, I'm not going to focus. It's going to be a life journey, a life story. And that's why I had to take the helm and write it, because I knew someone else would just take it and be like, well, what happened on this mission? Let's talk about this mission.
Yeah, we see that. We see that a lot. When Hollywood gets a hold of a story, Toby and I know of a number of people where they get a hold of a story, they have to cram a lot in 2.5 hours, and they want to hit the things that sell, right? And they don't tell really what's behind it. They're telling the explosions and the gunfire, So,
hey,
yeah.
let me just quote Kathy Lee Gifford real fast, because this is what Kathy Lee Gifford said about you. Remy Adeleke is a miraculous mountain of a man. His story is a living testimony to the unfailing love of his Lord and Savior. He is truly transformed in the deepest sense of the word, and his book will have a lasting impact on many souls.
Yeah.
So a couple things I just want to like unpack quickly there. First and foremost, like, she calls you a mountain of a man. Like,
Yeah.
But not just a mountain of a man. She's a mountain of miraculous events of a man.
Yeah.
And you like, it's you like when we use the term miracle, and a lot of it's this archaic term. People pray for them. And it's like, man, we're just hoping for a miracle. And when you look back, in the Bible, and you think of the biblical miracles, you're like, oh, it's water into wine, it's loaves to fishes, it's these like huge things. But as humans, as people, we forget about these extraordinary circumstances that are overcome daily. And and to be compared to that, and and you're like, all these different things. And then after she says that, she said the most important thing she says about you, and this speaks more to your character than anything else that we could probably say, is she talks about your unfailing love and commitment to someone other than yourself.
Amen.
She talks about your Lord and Savior, right? And the reason why I wanted to point that out, because there's a lot of praise for your book. There's a lot of, the people that have been blessed enough, like Troy and myself, to be able to get like early editions and kind of check it out.
Well, the endorsements and forwards in it are there's just pages of them. I mean, it's
it's crazy. But the reason I that one stuck in my mind is like, he brought her up, and that's why I had to go get it, because it was actually in my notes to talk about, because she'd not once mentioned Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
She not once mentioned African royalty. She not once mentioned single mom in the Bronx. She not once mentioned Hollywood.
Yeah.
Mark Wahlberg. She didn't mention any of that. What she said was, you're a mountain of a man that's dealt with miracles.
Yeah.
And you have an unfailing, a lot of people can say a lot of things about Kathy Lee Gifford.
Yeah.
She's a unique personality that's touched generations of Americans.
She's awesome.
And internationally.
Yeah, she's awesome.
She's one of the most well-known faces and personas in American culture. For her to say that about you,
it's humbling.
That's pretty strong, bro. That's she could be like, oh, and we all know, she's an earthly woman, she could be like, my dude here's the biggest jockey billboard in the
in Times Square. Times Square.
I'm swinging the battle like an Adonis. She could have said all that, but that's not what she said. She spoke to your character first. And I was really impressed by the fact that it showed her depth. And I forget, because as of late, you kind of see, people like that, her and her co-host, they have a good time, they're relaxed, and you're the way they deal in things, you forget, man, this is a person of strong character. This is a person that's a great mother. This is a person that's looking at the world through a different lens, and the lens that she looks at you is not of the guy in jockey shorts, which is a great endorsement, my man. That is I can't do that. We were joking before the show, how I was going to put a picture of me up in some underwear just as a joke. But dude, that's not what she wrote about. And she penned and inked those words, for the permanence of it. And I think that's pretty cool. The praise for this book is amazing. I'm excited about it to come out. Yeah. It's pre-order right now. You can get it on pre-order. We got links. Troy's diligently put links up.
Yep, in the chat, definitely.
It's called Transformed.
Now, I just saw it's on audiobook. Is that you doing the audiobook?
I read it. I read the audiobook a month ago. It was not the easiest thing to do, but it's very tedious because you have to get every word perfect.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to go into it. It's going to be super easy, but my voice was in pain My throat was in pain for like 3 days, but it's well worth it.
Again,
it's a great read.
That makes sense, dude. You wrote it. You also did the audiobook, so people can listen to you. A lot of people do that, right? They're on the road, they're driving, they like to. That's how they get books.
I do it all the time.
Yeah.
Which I'm glad you did your own, because like, I just what did I listen to not too long ago? Dave Goggins' book. It's like he didn't read his book. he didn't record his book. You're like, that ain't Dave Goggins. Click. You know, Jocko read his book though. Like Jocko and Leif both read their book. Yeah.
I want to get in real quick because a really important topic I want to get in before we let you go and before we let everyone go. Yeah. We talked about you being an inspiration for everybody and all that stuff, and I wonder, have you had the opportunity, and have you done it? I think you have, but just to go back to the neighborhood, to go to underprivileged areas, to go to areas like that, to be a in their face, physical, tangible person, to show them what it means to pull yourself from the bootstraps and get out of the niche that they're put in, or the stereotype that they think they have to be in, or that society tells them they have to be in. If you have, how has that been?
I've been doing that, man. I've been doing that since I got into teams. So right after I got into teams, I was just like in the inner cities of San Diego. I would just hang out, and I started with my church. I started out as a youth pastor at my church with inner city kids there, and then that just branched off. And I have kids who they're in college now. You know, some of the kids who I've pretty much mentored. I've been like a father to. A lot of them didn't have dads. I've steered them into different directions. That's my passion. That's my heart. You know,
that's awesome.
It's to go back to these kids, you know, in these inner cities and say, hey, you can make it. You can do it. Let's get rid of the foolishness. Let's stop, you know, let's get the work done. So yeah, I actually just agreed to go partner with a high school basketball team to help out with some coaching with some inner city kids, and just kind of be another father figure. I got kids who were at my house over the weekend who, you know, their dad's not in their life really, and we were playing basketball. So anytime I have 3 sons. I have 2 sons. My wife is due to give birth to our 3rd son any moment now.
Woo!
Yeah.
And you're on the show. She's like in the other room. You're like, hold on, baby.
Show on the show. And I said you got to hold off on labor until we get this done. But yeah, man, point. And that's how I end the book, man. You know, I don't want to give it all away, but I end the book just talking about the importance of finding that one or those 2 people and pouring into their life, because you never know how that person may change the world, right, or may influence many people just because of what you did in their life. So
right. The greatest reward, right? Better than anything else is to see someone else to know you had an influence on it, and especially a complete stranger, someone you didn't know. I think that's awesome. You don't no telling how many people are going to read your book, are going to be touched by it, but to know that you do that. That's why God put you in the path He put you in. That's why you've taken that path you have. We wonder why things happen to us the way they do. You know, that has happened, and you have reached out. And how many lives have you changed? How many kids have you kept out of the morgue or kept out of something worse by just doing that? And I think that's a blessing to you. I mean, that's the best accolade, the best award that I think you could ever have, brother.
Truth.
And
absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. But I want to make sure I hit on. I knew you had. I want to make sure I hit on that, because you know you've accomplished a lot. But I think a lot of our listeners, if you look back at your lives, a lot of us have accomplished things. A lot of us have been in dark places, bad places that we can be in, whether we have or not. But just by being there for our fellow man, right? Being an inspiration for him, right? Just calling and checking, or even worst case, texting someone, checking in on them. You know, when God puts it on your heart to reach out to someone, He's doing it for a reason. Just reach out to him. So, dude, what's awesome. But Remy, I'm so glad. I know we gotta get going, but I just, you know, before Toby wraps up, but man, I hope we stay in close contact. I hit you up on the Instagram. I hit you on the IG. I want to make sure we'll be tagging you on there, and I want to make sure we stay in close contact with you, brother.
No, absolutely. I appreciate it. And, send me a DM, because I haven't even been on my social media so that I could find you and follow you guys and all that kind of stuff. I've been kind of grinding. My assistant's been on the social media all day, kind of grinding away, but I've been writing. But, man, I appreciate being with you. It's an honor. It's a blessing. And thank you for allowing me to share. And, anytime you guys need anything, don't hesitate to hit me up.
Well, we definitely want to have you back on after Transforms Out, because we have a great audience that's, you know, fairly literature inept, and I like using that word incorrectly, but no, like we have a ton, we have a great following here that a lot of these people are readers, and everyone knows readers are leaders, and after the book's out and they can see what we've been able just to experience. We definitely want to have you back on to talk about it. You'll probably be too busy. You'll be too big time.
I'm gonna do it. No. See, everybody. I don't change. I don't change.
Yeah.
I'm the same all the time. If we brothers, we brothers. I don't care if I'm a multi-trillionaire. You call me, I'm still picking up at the same. I got the same number I've had since the Bronx, man. I'm serious.
That ain't on one of those phones you were selling, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Ixnay on the phone, sell it.
I had to go there.
It's gonna be awesome. We're excited, like for your book to come out. We're excited to, see this new project come out. You and my Canadian brother Ryan Reynolds, hanging with Michael Bay, blowing things up. We're excited about it.
Hanging with Robo is enough.
And then you, me, and Robo, we're gonna break it down on the big picture. But everybody go check them out on IMDb. We got the link up in the Facebook chat. Look for, it's on pre-order right now on Amazon. Yeah. You can get Transformed. It's by Remy. So you can just Google Transformed. Amazon pops up, or you can go to Amazon, put in the search bar Transformed, and you will find it. Get it on pre-order. It is worth every penny. It's spectacular story. You don't have American icons and just human icons giving it praise for no reason. It has got our full endorsement. I'm excited for it to get a couple copies, because I think we'll probably do something with our guests, some kind of earn a book from Remy kind of deal. I will inspire someone to go do some community service or something, and the person with the best community service project, we'll toss them a book, or someone that speaks into some kids or something. We'll do that. Man, we are honored, grateful that you had the time to come on. Look forward to next time, when you're big ballin' again. But I don't want to drag this out because your wife's.
No, it's so good.
I'll shut up.
No, that's good. I'll plug one last thing. So, I'm really trying to, we're really driving people to pre-order, and here's why, one of the reasons why we're doing that is because I have these exclusive video stories. So they're all stories that didn't make it into the book. And for those who pre-order, immediately after you pre-order, you unlock 17 exclusive video stories that didn't make it into the book. And I'm not the one telling the stories. The people who are part of the stories are the ones that are telling the stories. I interview people I sold drugs with. I interviewed my grandma, my Aunt Doki, who gave me the $100. Gave me more than $100, like $900, whatever it was, to be able to join the military. Girls I used to hang out with. All of these people who are in the book. So when you watch these videos and then you go read the book, you'll be able to say, oh, I remember that person from the book. So if you pre-order the book now, you will immediately unlock 17 exclusive video stories. So go pre-order so you can get that access.
Man, that is innovation. I mean, I've never heard anyone doing that before. I mean,
dude, that's so tight, bro. That is so tight.
What a way to tie people visually to see, like you said, they can say, oh, that's so-and-so. That's what they look like. That's what I pictured they look like. That's awesome. Hey, before I let you go, I do want to wish you, I know from Toby and I, both bottom of our heart, all the best, and you and your wife will be in our prayers, especially she's about to give, I mean, that's what a blessing. And so happy. And you guys will be in our thoughts and prayers, and hope that God brings you another angel into this world safe and sound for all of them. So I want to make sure to tell you that.
Thank you so much, brother. Thank you so much.
Awesome. All right. With that, we'll see everyone next week.
Yep, absolutely.
And, we'll be on time.
Yes, we should be. We should be. All right, everybody have a good night. And Remy, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for joining us tonight. I know we're a little bit long. Please, if you tell everyone about this episode. They want to hear the story. And go check out the book, Transformed, on Amazon. Pre-order now. Get the 17 stories. You're not going to regret it. Everyone have a good night. Remy, good night, brother.
Yes, sir. God bless. Good night, brothers. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Stu and the Nunn Radio. We hope you enjoyed your time with us because we have enjoyed sharing our time with you. Be sure to check out stewandthenunn.com in addition to asking us questions and interacting with us on our Facebook page and Twitter. We look forward to seeing you next Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern here on Spreaker and Facebook Live. Also, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Warrior Media Solutions, BlueHammer.com, Veteran Outdoors, Graybeard Publishing, and Mighty Oaks Warrior Foundation. Don't forget to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter. Thank you again, and have a good night.